Hello, welcome back to the Z-List with Zach Hammill. Today, I'm going to talk about the things that I watched in February, so let's get right to it. There was a lot. Starting out with The League, a documentary from 2023 directed by Sam Pollard about the Negro Leagues in baseball and the fascinating story about the ins and outs and inner workings in terms of not trying to make a statement, but really just wanting to play baseball and their means of getting to do that, which sent me down a rabbit hole of film, which I'm excited to tell you about in one of the next entries. After that, we have continuing the How to Train Your Dragon series with How to Train Your Dragon 2. Oh my gosh, even better than the first one. How was that possible? It's rare to have a good sequel, especially to an animated movie, unless it's Toy Story 2. And this one was fantastic. And Cate Blanchett, awesome. Groundhog Day, of course, because you're going to watch Groundhog Day when it's Groundhog Day. And incidentally, we started watching this movie on Groundhog Day and we fell asleep. And so we had to watch it again the next night. Yeah. After that, I watched a movie that was recommended to me by my friend Bettina Davis called Anna Lucasta, which I had never heard of. It's from 1958, starring Eartha Kitt and Sammy Davis Jr. It starts as a film noir and becomes a family melodrama, and it is really fascinating. It's got some very snappy film noir dialogue at the very beginning of the movie, and then tells this really sad and beautiful story about this woman who feels like she doesn't belong, who feels ostracized by her own family because of the choices that she's made. And it's just a beautiful movie. And also it has some of the most wonderful editing I've ever seen. There's one sequence toward the end of the movie where it has this real whiz-bang pace, cutting to drums and drinks pouring and dancing and laughter. And it's just incredible. It's an editing technique that I desperately want to steal. After that, I watched Nyad, which is one of the Academy Award nominated films this year for Annette Bening and Jodie Foster, who I want more buddy comedies starring the two of them. That was an absolutely wonderful film. After that, watched Rustin. The reason to watch Rustin is Colman Domingo. He is wonderful, magnetic. The film did not quite have the patina that I expect from a film set during that era. It was just a little too clean and a little too polished, but Colman Domingo and Jeffrey Wright, nice to see him in that as well, made up for it. After that, we have the second baseball film on this list, which is 8 Men Out from 1988, directed by John Sayles. Has an all-star cast of 80s who's who. John Cusack and Charlie Sheen and D.B. Sweeney, David Strathairn and Christopher Lloyd, Richard Edson. Just a fantastic movie. But what led me to that was The League. Actually, there was a brief mention in The League about the 1919 Black Sox scandal, and that reminded me, oh, they made a movie about this. And so I watched that movie, which has an absolutely incredible opening. One of the best openings I've ever seen in delivering like this big exposition dump that doesn't seem like an exposition dump. You're getting the viewpoints from the owners of the team, you're getting the viewpoints from the players, you're getting viewpoints from the gamblers, and it's all in the context of a baseball game before they decide that they're going to throw the World Series. Continuing the series with How to Train Your Dragon, The Hidden World. And how did I not see this series? Oh my gosh. So fun, so great, so emotional, so gripping. This one in particular was my favorite one. The third one is almost never my favorite one. And this one was my favorite one, and it was a brilliant send-off for a great trilogy. Next is One False Move, a great neo-noir from 1992, which is also the film debut of Carl Franklin, who later made Devil in a Blue Dress and is a great television director as well. But this one stars Cindy Williams, Billy Bob Thornton, who also co-wrote the screenplay, and Bill Paxton in one of his most Bill Paxton-y roles. Just wonderful. Hilarious and very interesting film. Another interesting thing was that Billy Bob Thornton and his co-writer Tom Epperson had another movie that came out in the 90s called A Family Thing, which also deals with race relations. And I'm very curious. I'd be curious to dig into that, why they had two scripts that were so similar and that they both got released. It's pretty remarkable. Next was a rewatch of The Last Black Man in San Francisco, directed by Joe Talbot, starring Jimmy Fails and Jonathan Majors. And this movie I hadn't seen since the theater. It was a little harder to get into the second time, I have to admit, but it really has a tremendous payoff, and it's so beautiful and so bizarre and artistic and wonderful, and I very, very much recommend it, especially if you're interested in topics like gentrification and identity. Just a wonderful movie. After that, I watched, get ready, Symbiopsychotaxiplasm, Take 1. It's a film from 1968, directed by William Greaves, a very, very experimental film that seems to be running through an exercise of two actors in some sort of melodramatic scene with maybe a director who's not very experienced in directing, but what was fascinating about it is that we get the scenes that he's filming for a movie that probably never got finished, but we're also getting additional scenes of the crew talking about the process, and who knows if this was part of the design the whole time, but really, really fun countercultural film. Next, I watched Heartburn from 1986, directed by Mike Nichols, starring Meryl Streep and Jack Nicholson. This was a Nora Ephron screenplay, and I'm a big Nora Ephron fan, but this one just did not hit the mark. It's one of Mike Nichols' lesser works, and certainly one of Nora Ephron's lesser works, which is too bad because I believe that this was largely based on the experience of her divorce from Carl Bernstein. So it would have been nice to see a little bit less of a jokey treatment for what was a really serious issue. After that, watch the wonderful DreamWorks Netflix animated film Orion in the Dark, directed by Sean Charmetz. This one was very fun, and it just got dumped onto Netflix because that's what they do. They just kind of dump things on there. But I hope you'll check it out. The thing that makes it interesting is there's a screenplay by Charlie Kaufman, who wrote Being John Malkovich and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and him writing a kid's movie is still no less a Charlie Kaufman movie, and in some ways is one of his best ones. It still deals with a lot of his same neuroses and the things that he's interested in, but with a lot less adult themes, let's say. A vocal performance by Paul Walter Hauser as the Dark. He was absolutely wonderful, a very fun role. And a shout out to an old collaborator, Robert Lydecker, who co-wrote the zippy, fun, dreamy score. I worked with him years ago on the series Terra Nova. Hey Bob, good work. So anyway, moving on, we have the film Sibyl from 2019, directed by Justine Triet. It's on Mubi right now, and the reason I checked it out is because her latest Anatomy of a Fall is up for a lot of Oscars right now. It kind of follows the story of a therapist who wants to be an author and decides to keep one patient who is an actress in a twisted love triangle, and how she decides to use her drama for her book and all the calamity that results from that. It also features a very, very funny performance from Sandra Hüller, who is also nominated this year for Anatomy of a Fall and was in The Zone of Interest, which is the Best Picture nominee. I thought it was very, very good, very twisty, very fun. Very dark. Next was, speaking of Zone of Interest, Sexy Beast, the first film by Zone of Interest director Jonathan Glazer from the year 2000. Terrific performances by Ray Winstone, plays a convict who's out of jail, ready to take on a new life in Spain with his wife, and Ben Kingsley comes back into his life to get him for a job, and he just won't say no. And it is a very fun crime film. Next is The Lego Movie 2, the second part from 2019, directed by Mike Mitchell. Very, very fun sequel. It was great. Next is my first viewing of Les Samourai from 1967 by Jean-Pierre Melville. And oh my gosh, what a fun, kooky little assassin movie. I really enjoyed it. It's one of those classic films that you should see. It's a French film. It's a very short running time. Very efficient in its storytelling and stylish as well. Highly recommend it. Next was a rewatch of Dune from Denis Villeneuve before seeing Dune Part 2. Interesting about Dune this time around, I found myself a little less engaged than I was on previous viewings. It was my favorite movie of the year that it came out, but I watched it in preparation for the new movie and treating it as an ongoing story, so I'm getting myself psyched up for that. Next was Drive Away Dolls by Ethan Coen, a new movie that a Coen brother is directing by himself. Great cast, fun concept, a lot of twists, but it fell flat in almost every way. It works better on paper than it does in real life. We've seen Joel without Ethan when he directed The Tragedy of Macbeth, and that fared pretty well, but Ethan without Joel, I don't know. And bringing up the rear, we have my first viewing of Kiki's Delivery Service from 1989 by Hayao Miyazaki, also up this year for The Boy and the Heron. And oh my gosh, wonderful. Wonderful. And at the end credits, I'm like, oh, this is unmistakably Phil Hartman's voice. But super fun. Probably my favorite Miyazaki that I've seen so far. Next was Heaven Can Wait, directed by Warren Beatty and Buck Henry. I'm a big Warren Beatty fan, but I had never seen this movie. And I'm also a big fan of Elaine May, who wrote the screenplay for this. And I had seen the version that they made in 2001 called Down to Earth with Chris Rock. And of course, this is a remake of a movie called Here Comes Mr. Jordan, but it has all the Beatty regulars like Jack Warden and Charles Grodin and Julie Christie. But then it has some fun parts for James Mason and Diane Cannon. It was just a fabulous movie, really fun. And last but not least was the 70mm re-release of Tenet by Christopher Nolan. This movie I did not see in the theater because it was during the pandemic, and I thought, well, if there's one Christopher Nolan movie I'm not going to see, it's probably going to be this one. This is a movie that I really love. I know that it's really confounding and perplexing, and I'm not saying that it isn't, but I just enjoyed it. However, seeing it on the big screen, it is a more overwhelming experience. So I have to admit I enjoyed it a little bit less on the big screen. So that's it. That's what I watched in February. Let me know in the comments what you think I should watch next based on some of these viewings, or if there's any of these that you like in particular. I'd love to hear about it. And while I'm here, I'd like to take a moment just to plug myself. I am a writer, director, editor. I do all sorts of filmmaking, from short films to music videos to mini documentaries and that sort of thing. So if you have any needs for this type of thing, let's have a chat. So thanks. Until next time, we'll see ya.